They laughed when Audrey chose the mute servant. They would not be laughing for long. The moon-choosing hall had never felt so cold, even with hundreds of candles burning beneath its vaulted stone ceiling. Audrey Bennett stood alone at the center of the polished floor, her hands steady only because she had locked her fingers together so tightly. Across from her, Trent Mallory had already made his choice. Brooke Langley stood beside him in silver silk, one hand resting proudly on his arm, while the elders recorded the rejection that had just changed Audrey's life. Trent did not look ashamed. If anything, he looked relieved. "You understand why this had to happen," he said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. Audrey swallowed. She understood perfectly. Brooke came with land, money, and influence. Audrey came with a smaller wolf, an omega rank, and nothing Trent considered useful. "I understand what you chose," she said. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Brooke smiled. At least now she knows her place. That earned the laugh she wanted. It moved through the hall in soft waves, cruel because no one had to raise their voice. Audrey felt every glance, every whisper, every person waiting to see whether she would cry. She would not. Elder Rowan Mercer lifted the ceremonial staff. Under Silver Creek law, Audrey Bennett retains the right of choice. She may name one willing, unmarried companion and leave her former household under protected status. The hall quieted. Then someone snickered. Everyone knew what the law meant. Audrey could choose, but the man had to accept. Several unmated wolves suddenly found the floor fascinating. One stepped behind his brother. Another turned toward the wine table. Trent folded his arms. "You do not have to embarrass yourself further, Audrey." She looked at him then, really looked. Once she had imagined growing old beside that face. Now all she saw was a man measuring human worth like property. Audrey turned away. Her gaze traveled past the warriors, past the merchants, past the sons of wealthy families who had laughed when Trent rejected her. At the far end of the hall, a servant crouched beside a fallen tray, quietly gathering silver cups. Eli Ward. Tall, broad-shouldered, silent. The servant who never spoke because he could not. Men in the kitchens called him slow-tongue when they thought he could not hear. Others simply called him mute, as if that were all he was. Audrey knew better. She had seen him give his lunch to a kitchen boy who had missed breakfast. She had watched him carry firewood for an elderly servant after finishing his own work. Once, after Trent had left Audrey standing alone in the rain, Eli had placed a dry cloak beside her without asking questions, then walked away before she could thank him. Small things, quiet things, things people did when they believed no one important was watching. Audrey started walking. The first few steps drew curious murmurs. By the time she crossed half the hall, people were openly staring. Eli rose slowly as she approached. His gray eyes met hers. Surprise flashed there, then caution. Audrey stopped in front of him. "Eli Ward." Someone behind her laughed. Trent's voice followed. "You cannot be serious." Audrey did not turn around. She held out her hand. "I am." Brooke gave a sharp little laugh. "You are choosing a servant?" Audrey kept her eyes on Eli. "I am choosing the only man in this room who has never treated weakness like permission to be cruel." Silence came quickly after that. Eli stared at her open hand. He did not move at first. Audrey could hear her own heartbeat. This was the part no one could decide for him. He could refuse. He had every right to. Then Eli set down the last silver cup. He straightened and placed his hand in hers. Warm, steady, certain. A murmur swept through the hall. Trent laughed once, but it sounded thinner now. Audrey barely heard him. She was watching Eli. Something about the way he stood had changed. His shoulders had settled back. His chin had lifted by the smallest degree. At a table near the wall, Elder Marcus Hale suddenly went still. Years ago, Marcus had served with the Royal Cavalry. His eyes dropped to Eli's free hand, resting behind his back in an old formal position almost no civilian would recognize. The color left Marcus's face. His goblet slipped from his fingers and struck the table with a hard metallic ring. Everyone turned. Marcus did not. He was still staring at the mute servant as if he had just seen a ghost wearing a servant's coat. By morning, the laughter from the moon hall had faded, but Audrey could still hear it in her head. She packed everything she owned into one worn leather bag, while Eli waited outside the Bennett household with a small wooden cart. No ceremony, no farewell. Trent had already sent word that Audrey was no longer welcome under his roof. The message should have hurt more than it did. Instead, as Audrey stepped into the pale morning light, she felt something unexpected. Relief. Eli reached for her bag, then paused and looked at her first. He always did that, asked without words. Audrey handed it over. "Thank you." He gave a small nod and placed it carefully in the cart. Their new home sat about 2 miles west of Moon Hall, near the edge of Silver Creek territory. Calling it a home was generous. The cottage leaned slightly to one side. 2 roof shingles were missing. One window had been patched with cloudy glass, and the front gate hung from a single hinge. Audrey stared at it for several seconds. "Well," she said, "Trent certainly spared no expense." Eli looked at the cottage, then at her. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, close enough to make Audrey laugh for the first time since the ceremony. Inside, the place smelled of dust, pine, and old smoke. There was one narrow bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a stone fireplace full of cold ash. Audrey set her bag down. Eli immediately checked the shutters, the back door, then the window beside the fireplace. At first, she assumed he was inspecting the damage. Then she noticed something strange. He was not looking at the wood. He was looking through the openings, at the tree line, at the road, at every place someone could approach without being seen. Audrey said nothing. Not yet. They worked through the morning. Eli repaired the front hinge with tools left in the shed. Audrey swept, washed the shelves, and found enough dry beans and flour to make a simple meal. When she dropped a stack of folded blankets, Eli bent to help. Their hands brushed. He pulled his back immediately. Audrey looked at him. "You know you do not have to act like I am made of glass." His expression changed. He reached into his coat and took out a small notebook with a charcoal pencil. He wrote, then turned the page toward her. "I did not want to assume." Audrey read it twice. Most men in Silver Creek assumed everything. Her time, her loyalty, her gratitude. Trent had even assumed her silence. "You can ask," she said softly. Eli wrote again. "You can say no." Something tightened in Audrey's chest, but this time it did not feel like rejection. "That sounds fair." They ate near the open window while afternoon light moved across the floorboards. Afterward, Audrey noticed Eli reading the old property agreement Trent had left on the table. He did not struggle with the legal wording. He moved quickly, following the dense lines with practiced ease. "You read better than half the elders," she said. Eli stopped. For the first time all day, he looked almost caught. He closed the document and reached for his notebook. Audrey shook her head. "You do not owe me an explanation." His gaze held hers for a long moment. Something guarded softened there. That night, the cottage settled around them with small creaks and taps. Audrey woke sometime after midnight and saw Eli standing near the front window. Moonlight traced the shape of his shoulders. He was perfectly still, not sleepy, not restless, watching. His eyes moved from the road to the tree line, then to the narrow path behind the shed. 1 exit, 2 approaches, 3 places to hide. Audrey did not know why that thought came to her, only that she suddenly understood what he was doing. Eli was not looking outside like a servant afraid of the dark. He was watching the property like a man expecting danger. Then he lifted one hand to his collar. The fabric shifted. In the moonlight, Audrey caught a glimpse of a pale silver scar running across his throat. Eli turned sharply. Their eyes met, and for one quiet second, Audrey had the unmistakable feeling that the man she had chosen was hiding far more than his voice. Audrey did not ask about the scar. Not that night. By morning, Eli had already rebuilt the loose shutter, stacked firewood beside the porch, and found the source of the leak above the kitchen. He worked with quiet patience, never wasting motion. Audrey watched him from the doorway while kneading bread dough at the small table. There was something almost unsettling about how capable he was, not because competence frightened her, because nothing about him matched the life of a servant. "You know," she said. Most men would complain before fixing half of this. Eli glanced at her. Audrey smiled. I suppose complaining is not really your style. His eyes narrowed with dry amusement. He took out the notebook he kept tucked inside his coat and wrote 3 words. Very funny, Audrey. She laughed, a real laugh this time. It surprised both of them. The sound seemed too warm for the broken little cottage Trent had given them as an insult. But over the next 2 days, warmth began appearing everywhere. A repaired chair, fresh curtains Audrey made from an old linen sheet, a clean shelf beside the fireplace. Eli found a cracked kettle in the shed, mended the handle, and set it near the stove as if it had always belonged there. They were not building anything grand, they were simply making the place theirs. That mattered more than Audrey expected. By late afternoon, her wolf began to ache. Rejection sometimes left a lingering weakness, especially when the bond had been forming for months before it was severed. Audrey tried to ignore it while carrying a basket of kindling inside, but her knees softened near the door. Eli was beside her before the basket touched the floor. He did not grab her. He simply held out one hand and waited. Audrey accepted it. He guided her to the chair, then crouched several feet away, watching her carefully. I am fine, she said. Eli gave her a look that clearly meant he did not believe her. He reached for the notebook. Rest. That is not the same as failing. Audrey stared at the words. Trent had spent months teaching her the opposite. Every weakness had been evidence. Every bad day had been proof that she was unworthy of standing beside him. Eli closed the notebook before she could answer and went to make tea. He returned with exactly the amount of honey she liked. Audrey had never told him. He had noticed. That evening, while the light faded over the trees, a commotion rose from the old stable behind the cottage. The previous tenant had left one horse behind, a gray stallion named Flint that none of the local workers wanted. Flint was nervous, stubborn, and famous for refusing anyone who tried to ride him. Audrey found the stallion pulling against his tether, restless from the wind. Easy, she murmured. Before she could move closer, Eli stepped past her. Audrey expected Flint to shy away. Instead, the stallion went still. Eli approached slowly, one hand raised. No force, no sharp command. He touched Flint between the eyes and waited. The horse lowered his head. Audrey blinked. You have done that before. Eli looked back at her. He could have pretended not to understand. He did not. A few minutes later, he checked the saddle, adjusted the stirrups, and mounted with effortless balance. Not like someone who had learned on a farm. Like someone who had spent years in a saddle. He guided Flint around the small field once, then twice. Using movements so precise, the horse seemed to respond before Eli even asked. Audrey folded her arms. You read legal documents like an elder. You watch doors like a guard. Now you ride like cavalry. Eli brought Flint to a stop. For a moment, neither of them moved. Audrey softened her voice. Whatever you were before this, you do not have to tell me until you are ready. Something changed in his face. The guarded distance she had seen since the moon hall eased, just slightly. Eli dismounted and walked toward her. He opened the notebook, hesitated, then wrote carefully. Thank you for not asking me to be someone else. Audrey looked up at him. I know what that feels like. That night, after dinner, she found him standing beside the fireplace with an old map of Silver Creek spread across the table. He was studying the roads north, not the village. His fingers stopped on a faded mark near an abandoned watchtower. Then, almost as if he sensed her behind him, Eli folded the map at once. Audrey said nothing, but for the first time, she wondered if the mystery was not simply who Eli had once been. Maybe it was what he was still waiting for. The next morning, Audrey found the map exactly where Eli had left it, folded beneath the edge of the table. She did not touch it. If he wanted her to know why the abandoned watchtower mattered, he would tell her when he was ready. That was the promise she had made without saying it aloud. By late afternoon, the cottage almost looked respectable. Eli had repaired the last broken shutter. Audrey had swept the porch and hung clean cloth over the kitchen window. For the first time since leaving Moon Hall, she caught herself imagining that this place might actually become home. Then 3 men from Silver Creek came walking up the road. Audrey recognized them immediately. They had been standing near Trent during the ceremony, laughing louder than most. Today, their voices carried before they reached the gate. "So this is where Mallory put you," one called. "Fitting." Audrey stepped onto the porch. Eli came out behind her but stayed several feet back. "If Trent sent you, you can tell him we are doing fine." "Trent did not send us," another man said. "We were curious." His eyes shifted toward Eli. "About him." Eli did not move. The tallest man leaned against the broken fence post and smiled. "People are saying you chose a servant because no one else would take you." Audrey felt the old sting, but it did not settle as deeply as it once had. People in Silver Creek seemed to have a lot of free time. The men exchanged looks. One stepped onto the porch without being invited. Eli moved then. Not quickly, not aggressively. He simply placed himself between Audrey and the stranger. The change was immediate. His shoulders squared. His weight shifted. One hand stayed loose at his side, while the other rested near his waist. Audrey had seen guards stand that way outside official hearings. Calm, balanced, ready without showing it. The man on the porch noticed too. His smile faded. "What are you supposed to be?" Eli said nothing. The stranger took another step. At that exact moment, a loose lantern hook above the doorway gave way. The lantern dropped. Eli caught it before it reached the floor. One hand, cleanly, without even looking up. Silence followed. Audrey stared. Eli set the lantern on the porch rail as if nothing had happened. The tallest visitor straightened. "That was lucky." Audrey looked at Eli. She did not think luck had anything to do with it. The three men left soon after, carrying less confidence than they had arrived with. When the road was quiet again, Audrey folded her arms. "You know, every time I decide not to ask questions, you give me 3 more. Eli pulled out his notebook. "This is why I prefer silence." Audrey laughed. "Convenient." His eyes warmed. For a moment, the mystery around him did not matter. They spent the evening repairing a small shelf near the fireplace. Audrey handed him nails while Eli worked. At one point, he looked at her and seemed to make a decision. He touched 2 fingers lightly to his throat. Then he tried to speak. Only a rough, strained sound came out. His face tightened immediately. Audrey reached for his wrist. "Stop." Eli looked frustrated. "You do not have to hurt yourself just because I can talk and you cannot." His expression softened. Audrey released his wrist slowly. "If you want to tell me something, write it. Or show me. I will learn." Eli stared at her for a long moment. Then he raised one hand and made a simple sign. Audrey copied it badly. His mouth curved into a real smile. "Was that terrible?" she asked. He nodded. Audrey laughed again. The room felt warmer after that. Safer. Almost ordinary. Then something struck the wooden frame beside the window with a sharp crack. Audrey froze. Eli did not. He crossed the room at once and pulled the shutter closed. Embedded in the outside frame was a narrow, black-fletched bolt. 3 small notches had been carved into its shaft. Eli saw them. The warmth vanished from his face. For the first time since Audrey had known him, the silent man looked afraid. For 1 second, Audrey forgot to breathe. Eli had never looked frightened before. Cautious, yes. Guarded, always. But this was different. His eyes stayed fixed on the black-fletched bolt as if it had carried a message meant only for him. Then he moved, fast. He crossed the room, blew out the lamp, and motioned for Audrey to stay low. She did not argue. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Nothing else moved. Eli pulled the bolt free from the window frame and turned it in his hand. 3 small notches marked the shaft. His jaw tightened. Audrey whispered, "You know what that means." Eli looked at her. He did not deny it. A soft scrape came from the back of the cottage, then another. Someone was moving around the house. Eli pointed toward the rear door, then toward the tree line beyond the shed. Audrey understood. Leave. Now. They slipped outside into the dark and crossed the yard without speaking. Audrey knew these woods better than Eli did. She led him away from the main path, through a narrow trail between the pines where the ground dipped sharply toward a creek bed. Behind them, voices rose near the cottage. "He is here." Another voice answered, lower and closer. "He should have died at Blackridge." Audrey nearly stopped. Eli caught her elbow and shook his head. "Keep moving." Blackridge. The name meant little to her, but Eli's reaction did. Whatever he had been hiding was not behind him. It had followed him to Silver Creek. They reached the creek and crossed over a fallen log. Eli moved well, but Audrey noticed his breathing had changed. Too shallow, too controlled. A faint silver-gray stain darkened the fabric near his side. Audrey's stomach dropped. "You are hurt." Eli shook his head. She glared at him. That was not a question. He almost smiled, but the effort faded quickly. They kept going until the trees opened around a shallow rock shelter hidden beneath the ridge. Audrey had played there as a child. No road reached it. No one from the pack used it anymore. Inside, Eli lowered himself against the stone wall. Audrey knelt beside him and carefully pulled back the torn edge of his coat. The injury was small, but the skin around it looked wrong. Pale, angry, slow to heal. Eli caught her wrist before she touched it and pointed to the silver discoloration. "Moon silver," Audrey whispered. He nodded. Everyone in Silver Creek knew what moon silver could do to a shifter. Slow healing, drain strength, make shifting dangerous. Audrey tore a clean strip from the lining of her old cloak and wrapped the area as gently as she could. Eli watched her the entire time. "You could have left me at the cottage," she said quietly. His expression sharpened. He reached for his notebook, but it was gone. Lost somewhere during the escape. Frustration crossed his face. Audrey shook her head. "I know. You would not have." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Eli reached beneath his shirt and pulled out a small black medallion on a leather cord. A crowned wolf was stamped into the metal. He pressed it into Audrey's palm. She stared at him. "What is this?" Eli pointed north, then mimed a tower with 2 raised fingers. Audrey remembered the old map on the cottage table, the abandoned watchtower. He tapped the medallion, then pointed toward the tower again. "You want me to take this there?" Eli nodded. "And then what?" He took her hand, closed her fingers around the token, and looked directly into her eyes. Then he traced 3 words against her palm, slowly enough for her to understand. "Someone will come." Audrey looked down at the crowned wolf in her hand. "Who?" Eli's face went still. Before he could answer, a distant howl rose through the forest. Then another answered from farther east. Pack wolves. Searchers. Audrey looked toward the darkness outside the shelter. Eli pushed himself upright despite the moon silver weakening him. For the first time, she understood something clearly. The people hunting them were not looking for a servant. And whatever waited at that old watchtower might be the only reason either of them made it through the night. The howls behind them grew closer. Audrey tightened her fingers around the black medallion and looked north through the trees. The old watchtower was less than 2 miles away, but Eli was slowing. The moon silver had drained the color from his face, and every few steps he had to steady himself against a tree. Audrey moved beside him. "Lean on me." Eli shook his head. "Do not argue with me now." He gave her a tired look, but this time he listened. They crossed the creek, climbed the narrow ridge, and reached the watchtower just before dawn began to gray the sky. Audrey had seen the ruined structure from a distance many times as a child. Up close, it looked older than she remembered. Ivy covered the stone. Half the wooden stairs had collapsed. A weathered carving of a crowned wolf remained above the doorway. Audrey looked at the medallion in her palm, then at Eli. "This symbol is the same." He nodded. Inside, dust covered the floor. Eli pointed toward a narrow stone column near the back wall. Audrey found a small opening shaped exactly like the edge of the medallion. Her pulse quickened. "You knew this was here." Eli held her gaze. Then he touched 2 fingers to his chest and made the simple hand sign she had learned the night before. "Me." After that, he pointed toward the faded royal crest carved into the wall. Audrey understood only part of it. You served the crown? Eli hesitated, then nodded once. It explained too much and not enough. The discipline, the writing, the way he watched every door. Audrey pushed the medallion into the slot. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something deep inside the tower clicked. A low hum moved through the stone. Above them, the old moonstone lens caught the first pale light of dawn. One blue-white flare rose into the sky, then a second, then a third. Audrey stepped back. Who sees that? Eli pointed north, farther than Silver Creek, farther than the Packlands. Someone he trusted, someone connected to the crown. Hope stirred in Audrey, small but real. It lasted less than a minute. Voices came from the trees below. They are here! Eli turned toward the doorway, his body tensed, but the moon's silver had weakened him too much to run far. Audrey looked toward the broken rear stairs. There's an old chapel east of here. My grandmother used to take me there when I was little. We can hide there. Eli nodded. They left the tower before the searchers reached it and followed a narrow deer trail through the woods. The abandoned chapel appeared after sunrise, half hidden beneath pine branches. Audrey helped Eli inside. He lowered himself onto an old wooden bench, breathing hard. Stay here, she whispered. I will check the back. Eli caught her hand. He shook his head. Together. Audrey understood. They had barely crossed the chapel floor when the doors opened behind them. Trent Mallory stepped inside with several Silver Creek guards. His expression was calm, almost satisfied. Audrey. She turned slowly. You sent people after us. I sent people to bring you home. His eyes moved to Eli. He is the problem. Audrey stepped between them. Then why were strangers from Blackridge trying to find him before your men were? Trent's face changed, only for a second, but Audrey saw it. Eli saw it too. Trent walked closer. His gaze dropped to the pale scar across Eli's throat, then to the silver-gray stain near his side. Something like recognition entered his eyes. Interesting, Trent murmured. Eli went completely still. Audrey felt the air in the chapel tighten. Trent lowered his voice. Blackridge should have finished you. Audrey stared at him. What did you say? Trent realized his mistake. Too late. Eli moved in front of Audrey, not to attack, but to shield her. The guards closed in. With Eli weakened and Audrey surrounded, there was nowhere to go. He looked back at her and made one clear sign with his hand. Trust me. Then he let them take him. Audrey stayed beside him as they were escorted toward Silver Creek. She no longer believed Trent had rejected her only for power. He was hiding something far darker. And somewhere to the north, 3 royal flares were still burning in the morning sky. By the time Audrey and Eli were brought back to Moon Hall, the room was already filling. Word had traveled faster than they had. Pack members crowded the benches where they had laughed only days earlier, eager to see what Trent Mallory called a public hearing. Audrey recognized the same faces, the same curious eyes, the same people who had watched her choose Eli as if she had thrown away the last piece of her dignity. Only now, nobody was smiling quite as easily. Eli stood beside her with silver restraints around his wrists. The moon silver had left him pale and unsteady, but his posture remained straight. Trent took his place beneath the carved crest of Silver Creek. Brooke stood near him in a dark blue dress, looking more irritated than frightened.
Audrey Bennett,
Trent began. You were taken from your home by a man who entered this pack under a false identity. Audrey stared at him. I left with him willingly. A murmur moved through the hall. Trent ignored it. This servant has attacked pack members, carried property marked with the royal crest, and drawn dangerous outsiders into Silver Creek. Audrey felt the black medallion hidden beneath her cloak. Trent's eyes dropped toward the movement. Search her. One of the guards stepped forward. Audrey did not resist. The medallion was found within seconds and placed in Trent's hand. He turned it over beneath the light. For the first time, something close to fear crossed his face. Then he hid it. Stolen, he said. Eli looked at him sharply. Audrey heard Brooke laugh from beside the platform. You gave up an alpha for a mute thief. I almost admire the commitment. Several people chuckled, but the sound died quickly. Audrey looked at Eli. He was watching her, not Trent. Then he shook his head once. She understood what he meant. Take the way out. Trent seemed to understand too. I am willing to be generous, he said. Tell everyone here that he deceived you. Renounce your right of choice. Say that you followed him because you were frightened and confused, and this ends for you today. Audrey felt something old rise inside her, the instinct to make herself smaller, to survive by giving powerful people the answer they wanted. That version of her had stood in this same hall and listened while Trent explained why she was not enough. She was tired of her life being written by someone else. Audrey walked toward Eli. One guard moved as if to stop her, but Trent raised a hand. He wanted the audience to see her surrender. Audrey stopped beside Eli instead. She reached for his restrained hand and held it. I chose him when I thought he had nothing. The hall went still. I did not know where he came from. I did not know why he could not speak. I did not know why he watched every door, or why men from Blackridge were hunting him. Trent's expression hardened. Audrey continued. But I knew how he treated people who had nothing to offer him. She looked directly at Trent. That told me more about him than rank ever could. Eli's fingers tightened around hers. Audrey felt him trembling from exhaustion, but he did not pull away. Whatever his real name is, she said, my choice was mine. You do not get to rewrite it because it became inconvenient for you. No one laughed now. Trent descended one step from the platform. You are making a serious mistake. Maybe, Audrey lifted her chin, but at least it is mine. For a moment, Trent simply stared at her. Then his gaze shifted to Eli, and the control in his face began to crack. Take him below until the royal authorities can be contacted. Audrey caught the contradiction immediately. If Trent truly believed Eli was only a thief, why did he suddenly need royal authority? Eli noticed too. His gray eyes sharpened. Somewhere far beyond the hall, faint at first, came the sound of horses moving fast over the northern road. One rider, then many. Conversation stopped. Trent turned toward the doors. The sound grew louder. Outside, someone shouted from the courtyard. Another voice answered, breathless and stunned. Royal banners! Audrey looked at Eli. He closed his eyes for one brief second, as if hearing something he had been waiting for far longer than she could understand. Then the heavy doors of Moon Hall began to open. The doors opened wide, and the entire hall seemed to forget how to breathe. Men in dark royal armor entered first, moving in perfect formation beneath banners marked with the crowned wolf of the northern realm. Their boots struck the stone floor in measured rhythm. No one spoke. Audrey felt Eli straighten beside her. Not much, just enough to notice. Trent recovered first. He stepped forward quickly, lifting the black medallion in one hand. Commander, thank the moon. We were about to send word. We have captured a man carrying royal property under a false name. The officer at the front did not answer him. He was older than Trent, broad-shouldered, with black hair touched by silver at the temples. His gaze moved across the room once, cold and controlled, before stopping on Eli. Everything in his face changed. Not shock exactly. Something deeper. Relief held under discipline. Commander Everett Shaw, someone whispered near the back. Audrey had heard the name before. Everyone had. Everett Shaw had commanded the Royal Guard for more than a decade. Trent smiled as if this confirmed his own importance. The prisoner calls himself Eli Ward. He has been deceiving this pack. Everett walked past him. Trent's smile faded. The commander stopped several feet from Eli. His eyes dropped to the silver restraints, then to the scar across Eli's throat. Audrey watched Everett's jaw tighten. For one terrible second, she thought he was angry with Eli. Then Everett reached for his sword. Brooke inhaled sharply. Trent stepped aside. Audrey's hand tightened around Eli's. He looked at her, calm, tired, almost apologetic. Everett drew the blade, but he did not raise it. He turned it, lowered the point toward the floor, and placed the weapon carefully on the stone between them. Then the commander of the royal guard went down on one knee. The sound of his armor touching the floor echoed through the hall. Audrey stared. One guard behind him knelt, then another, then all of them. Rows of royal soldiers lowered their heads before the silent man in servant clothes. No one in Silver Creek moved. No one laughed. Everett bowed his head. "Your Majesty." Audrey felt the words before she understood them. Her fingers went cold. Beside her, Eli closed his eyes, only for a moment. Everett looked up again. "Alpha King Graham Holloway, we have searched from Blackridge to the northern border for 6 weeks." A faint sound moved through the crowd. Not speech, disbelief. Audrey looked at Eli. Graham. The name seemed impossible against everything she knew. The man who fixed her broken shutter, the man who made tea the way she liked it, the man who slept in a leaking cottage without complaint, the man everyone had called a servant. Trent stepped backward. "No." Everett turned his head. "Excuse me?" Trent looked from the commander to Eli, then to the kneeling guards. "This is some mistake." Everett stood slowly. "I've served the king since before you held an alpha title." His voice remained calm. "I know his face." Audrey looked at Eli again. He did not suddenly seem larger. He did not need to. The room around him had changed instead. Every person who had looked down on him was now trying to understand how badly they had misjudged what stood in front of them. Everett gestured to one of his officers. The silver restraints were removed from Eli's wrists. He flexed his hands once, then turned immediately toward Audrey. Not toward Trent. Not toward Brooke. Toward her. Everett followed his gaze.
"Who is she?"
Eli reached for the nearest writing slate from the clerk's table. His hand was weak, but steady. He wrote one sentence and handed it to Everett. The commander read it, then looked at Audrey with new respect.
"The woman who kept me alive."
Audrey's throat tightened. Trent's face had gone pale. Everett held out one hand toward him.
"The royal token."
Trent did not move.
"Now."
Slowly, Trent placed the black medallion into Everett's palm. The commander examined it, then looked toward the guards.
"Secure the hall. No one leaves until the king decides what happens next."
Graham took the slate again. This time he wrote more slowly. Audrey watched every letter. When he turned it toward her, the message was only 4 words. "I owe you the truth." Graham did not ask Audrey to forgive him. That mattered. He sat beside the clerk's table while Everett Shaw placed the black medallion between them, and for the first time, Audrey saw the weight behind the silence he had carried from the beginning. Graham wrote slowly. 6 weeks earlier, someone inside the northern packs had sold the route of the royal convoy traveling through Blackridge Pass. Moonsilver had been moved through Silver Creek without royal approval. Graham survived the attack, but the wound across his throat took his voice. He came to Silver Creek under the name Eli Ward because he needed proof before accusing anyone. Audrey read every word. Then she looked at Trent. "You knew." Trent tried to answer, but Everett stopped him with one calm question. "Where are your freight records?" Trent said nothing. That silence was enough to begin the search. The royal guard opened the locked desk in Trent's office and found the ledger Graham had suspected existed. Shipment dates, payments, moonsilver quantities, routes. Enough to prove Trent had helped the Blackridge network move supplies through Silver Creek. He had not planned the entire conspiracy, but he had chosen ambition over loyalty and believed no one powerful enough to challenge him would ever learn the truth. By sunset, Trent had been removed from command and placed under royal custody to face a formal hearing. Brooke was questioned and released when no evidence tied her to the conspiracy. Her political rise ended with Trent's fall, but Graham refused to punish cruelty as if it were treason. Audrey noticed that too. Power, in his hands, did not have to become revenge. When the hall finally emptied, Graham asked everyone to leave except Audrey and Everett. Then he wrote another message. "The right of choice must be ended. Audrey's chest tightened. For one painful second, she thought this was the moment he walked away from her. Graham saw it in her face and immediately kept writing. The first time, you had to choose someone or lose your independence. That was not freedom. He placed the slate down and looked at Everett. The king is granting you full protection under the crown, Everett explained. Your cottage and land will remain yours. No household can claim authority over you. No bond, no obligation. Audrey looked back at Graham. He was giving her the one thing no one else had ever offered without conditions. A real choice. Graham stood. He looked almost uncertain now, which somehow affected her more than seeing an entire guard kneel before him. He took one step back, leaving space between them. Audrey smiled through the ache in her throat. So this is where you let me go? Graham lowered his eyes. Audrey crossed the space between them. She held out her hand exactly as she had in Moon Hall. Then let me choose again. His gaze lifted. Graham Holloway, she said. I choose you. He looked at her hand for a long moment before taking it. No law required it. No crowd forced it. No rank made the decision for either of them. 3 months later, Audrey returned with Graham to the cottage west of Silver Creek. The shutters were still uneven. The porch still creaked. She touched the old window frame and smiled. Graham, still unable to speak more than a few strained sounds, signed with one hand. Home. Audrey signed back. This one or the palace? His answer came immediately. Where you are. She laughed and rested her head lightly against his shoulder while evening settled over the trees. The lesson was simple. Titles can impress people, but character reveals them. Audrey chose kindness before she knew the crown existed, and Graham returned that choice with freedom instead of control. I think that is the kind of love worth remembering. What would you have chosen in Audrey's place? Share your thoughts and subscribe for more stories where courage, dignity, and destiny meet.